When the bank froze my account, I thought I was losing my mind. Turns out my daughter had moved $240 million, but she forgot one thing. I still had the trust key. There is nothing more painful than when I, a senile old woman, was cursed by my own daughter with these harsh words. That's what you're worth. A jar of loose change. That's all you've ever been. You want to play dumb about the trust? Fine. But know this. I've already talked to the attorney, the hospital, the court. If you don't give me every document, every key, you'll lose more than this house. I'll have you declared incompetent by the end of the month. Do you understand me? The kettle had just started to whistle when she walked in. I didn't turn around. My hands, though slower these days, remembered the rhythm. 2 cups on the table, 1 spoon, no sugar. I still laid the table like she was 7 and not 44, like this house still meant something to her, but it didn't. Not anymore. She didn't say hello, just dropped a thick manila folder in front of me with the same grace she uses to throw out trash. "Mama, sign these," she said, her voice clipped and impatient. I looked at her. Her coat was still on, her boots dusted with the frozen gravel from the driveway, her hair pulled back into a tight bun like a noose behind her head. And her eyes, those same dark eyes I once looked into as I held her tiny body close on nights she had nightmares. Those eyes now held nothing, no warmth, no regret, just calculation. I reached for my reading glasses and unfolded the papers. I had a feeling what they were, and I was right. A full power of attorney, complete control of the trust, my husband's legacy, the fund he and I built for our old age and for our family after we passed. No review clause, no shared access, no oversight. Just Martha. "I don't understand," I said slowly, though I did. "It's time," she replied. "You're not managing things well anymore. You've forgotten to pay the electric bill twice. You've made mistakes at the bank. This is safer for everyone." Her tone was flat, clinical, just like when she delivered bad news to patients, I imagine. I looked at her face, searching for my daughter beneath that polished exterior. But she was gone, replaced by a woman who called me mother, like it was a burden. "Your father and I, this isn't what we planned," I said, trying to stay calm. She scoffed. Not a laugh, just a sound of disbelief wrapped in superiority. "Dad built that trust. You just watched it grow. Let's stop pretending you had any real part in it." I felt something hard and old rise in my chest, but I didn't speak it. I simply set the paper down. "Sit down," I said. "Have some tea. We'll talk." She didn't move. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a wad of small bills, crumpled ones and 5s, and dropped them on the table like she was tipping a waitress. Then she picked up a glass from the sink, filled it halfway with cold tap water, and began dropping coins into it one by one. Plink, plink, plink. I watched silently. She held the glass up, walked over, and without hesitation flung the entire contents, water, coins, and all, onto my chest. The shock of the cold made me gasp. The coins hit the floor with a scatter, some rolling beneath the refrigerator. My blouse clung to my skin. The room smelled of metal and humiliation. "There," she said, her voice sharp and vicious. "That's what you're worth, a jar of loose change. That's all you've ever been. You want to play dumb about the trust? Fine. But know this. I've already talked to the attorney, the hospital, the court. If you don't give me every document, every key, you'll lose more than this house. I'll have you declared incompetent by the end of the month. Do you understand me?" I didn't answer. I bent down slowly and picked up one of the coins, a tarnished quarter. Funny thing about age, it dulls the nerves but sharpens the memory. That quarter reminded me of the first time I had enough change to buy Martha a pair of shoes that weren't second-hand. I held the coin tightly, my wet sleeve dripping onto the tile. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. You can keep your coins, I said quietly, rising to my full height. I kept something else, something stronger, something she didn't even know existed. The truth. She froze. For the first time that morning, she didn't know what to say. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? But I didn't answer. I looked at her the way mothers do when they stop begging their children to see them and simply start seeing the truth instead. She stood there, fists clenched, then yanked the folder off the table and stormed out the front door. The wind that rushed in behind her was bitter and dry. The door slammed shut. Silence settled back into the house. I stood there for a long while, soaked to the bone, one hand on the chair, one foot on a coin that didn't belong to me. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I had seen this moment coming for a very long time. I just didn't expect it to feel this cold. I met Charles Franklin Howard on a Thursday in September 1960. I was 19. He was 22 and already halfway through medical school. I was working at a fabric shop, saving up to go back and finish my diploma. I never did. He came in looking for curtain lining. I sold him a thread he did not need just to keep him talking. 2 months later, we were married in the back room of a Methodist church with fresh lilies and 10 guests. I wore a borrowed dress and a crooked veil. He wore nerves and ambition. He promised me the world. Instead, I gave it to him when he studied late into the night. I stitched buttons onto men's shirts and darned socks to keep us afloat. I worked every job no one else wanted: seamstress, babysitter, cook. I fed us on boiled beans and bruised fruit. I kept the lights on with pennies saved from skipped lunches. It was not a sacrifice. It was love. Charles became a surgeon, a good one, revered, respected, the kind that small-town hospitals build their reputations on, the kind that never came home before midnight. We moved into a proper house. I stopped working jobs with hourly wages and started keeping our home like it was a sacred space: clean floors, hot meals, well-ironed collars. I raised our 2 children, David and Martha, like the entire future of the family depended on how straight they stood and how kindly they spoke. Charles loved me, but he loved being adored more. At first, I excused the late calls, the cologne that was not his. He was a doctor. People needed him. Patients were dying. So was my self-respect. Then came the call I could not ignore. A woman. Her voice was young and sharp. I remember the sound more than the words, the kind of voice that does not beg for understanding. It demands surrender. I confronted him. He did not lie. That hurt more than if he had. He told me it had ended. He said it had been meaningless. I believed him, not because he was convincing, but because I had 2 children sleeping upstairs and no family to run to. We did not speak of it again. Not once. I forgave him. Not for him, not even for me. For Martha, who was 7, and David, who was 12. For the illusion of safety, for stability, because love does not always come wrapped in respect. Sometimes it comes bound in survival, but even after that, I stayed not because I was weak, but because I had built too much to walk away from it without setting fire to my own life. Charles eventually grew older and tired. He came home earlier and started gardening. He made Lily a dollhouse from scratch, painted it lavender and white. I think in his own way he tried to atone for everything he had not said. Still, he played favorites. David could do no wrong. He walked like his father, talked like him, and carried himself like a crown prince. Charles gave him praise, patience, and forgiveness. He gave Martha expectations. She was brilliant, just like him. But Charles treated her like a threat to his legacy. Every mistake she made, he catalogued. Every success he critiqued. She learned to work twice as hard for half the affection. When David died in a car accident at 26, something in Charles broke. Something in all of us did. But what shattered in Martha was different. She never said it out loud, but I think a part of her always believed that her brother's death brought her Charles's approval. It did not. After the funeral, Charles grew quieter. He wrote letters he never sent. He kept a single tie in David's closet that no one was allowed to touch. But with Martha, he remained distant and formal, like he could not find a version of her that did not remind him of what he had lost or what he had ignored. I tried to be the bridge between them. I encouraged him to praise her and to listen when she spoke. But years of silence can turn into stone. And Charles had a talent for letting stones pile up between him and the people who loved him most. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he refused treatment. He said he was tired of cutting into other people's bodies and would not let anyone cut into his. We had 12 months, some good, most quiet. One night near the end, I sat beside him in the den. The fire had gone out. I thought he was asleep when he whispered, "If she ever turns into me, if she ever loses sight of what matters, don't give her everything. Keep something for yourself. Protect yourself, Evie. Do not trust blood more than you trust your own instincts." He was talking about Martha and himself. The next day he called Richard Langford, an old friend, a fellow veteran, a man I had never known him to trust anyone with besides a scalpel. They met in private, and I did not ask questions. When Charles passed, Richard delivered a sealed envelope with a key and one simple instruction: use this only if you feel the walls closing in. I tucked it away in my Bible. Between Psalms and Proverbs, I prayed I would never need it. I should have known better, because Martha was her father's daughter. She inherited his brilliance, his pride, and as I would come to find out, his capacity to wound the ones who loved her most. It started with a phone bill. I was standing at the grocery store checkout, trying to pay for milk and bread, when my card was declined. The young man at the register offered a polite smile, but I saw the glance he gave the customer behind me. That look of poor old woman pity that slips out before people realize it. I stepped aside, fumbling through my bag for a backup card I never used. It worked barely, but something felt off. When I got home, I tried logging into my account. The page wouldn't load. I tried calling the bank. After 40 minutes on hold, a woman with a voice too chipper for bad news told me my access had been restricted due to updated guardianship status. I did not understand. "Ma'am," she said, "it shows here that your financial authority has been transferred to a legally designated guardian. Do you have paperwork from a court-appointed representative?" I froze. "No," I said. "There's no guardian. This is my account. I've had it for over 30 years. "I'm sorry," she said gently, as if I were a child, "but according to our system, that is no longer the case." The line went quiet, except for her tapping keys. "Then is there someone else in the household who manages your affairs? A daughter, perhaps, Martha?" My heart sank like a stone. A month earlier, she had visited me after a routine doctor's appointment. She had brought tea, her tone unusually warm. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one where she had once thrown cold water and coins, and asked, "Mama, would it be okay if I helped you with some of the paperwork just to keep things in order? I can handle the medical bills more efficiently from Florida." I had nodded. It sounded reasonable. She was, after all, a doctor. She knew about hospital billing, about insurance codes and copay loopholes. She said it would save me stress. She asked for my online banking login just in case, and I gave it. Now everything was gone. I called her that night. It was late, but I needed answers. She picked up on the second ring, her voice calm, distracted. I could hear the sound of ice clinking in a glass, music in the background. "Hi, Mother." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Why can't I access my accounts?" Silence, a beat too long. "Then you must be confused. We talked about this, remember?" "No, Martha, we didn't. Not about transferring authority, not about guardianship." Another pause. "You're probably just mixing things up. You've been forgetting a lot lately. You told me last week that you couldn't remember what day it was. This is why I stepped in. It's safer." "Martha, I'm not confused. I'm angry. Did you file paperwork without telling me?" "I did what was necessary," she said, her tone turning. "You left the oven on last week, didn't you? Burned a pot until the smoke alarm went off. What if it had been worse? One pot doesn't make me incompetent. It's not just the pot. It's everything. It's you refusing help. It's you acting like money you didn't even earn is somehow yours to mismanage. That stopped me cold. It was your father's money," she continued. "You were just there. You signed papers, but it was his. It should have gone to me a long time ago. I was his wife," I said quietly. She sighed long and tired, as though my very existence exhausted her. "I don't want to argue. It's done. Go rest. I'll handle everything." She hung up before I could speak again. I stood in the hallway for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a wasp I couldn't swat away. The next day I went to the bank in person. I wore my best coat and pinned on my silver brooch, the one Charles had given me on our 30th anniversary. I stood tall like a woman who still belonged in the world. The teller looked at my ID, tapped her keyboard, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You've been flagged as a restricted account holder. We can't give you access without written permission from your legal guardian." "I'm not under guardianship," I said firmly. She showed me the screen, my name with a bold red banner, Financial Protection Statute, Active Guardian, Martha E. Howard. I did not cry. Not there. I thanked her, left the bank, and walked 3 blocks before my knees gave out, and I had to sit on a bench outside a Walgreens. The cold seeped in through my shoes, and I watched people pass. Young mothers with strollers, teenagers with headphones, couples with matching scarves. The world had moved on. When I returned home, Mrs. Talbot, my neighbor, was walking her little dog, Tater. She waved. "I saw your daughter's name in the local register," she said cheerfully. "Howard, right? She's listed on that new property opening near Clearwater Beach. Cute little resort. Grand opening in April. Looks fancy." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "My daughter lives in an apartment. She rents." "Oh no," she said, digging into her coat pocket for her phone. It was in the announcement section. "She's listed as co-owner. They're calling it the Sea Lass. Isn't that a sweet name?" I nodded slowly, but I felt like the earth had tilted beneath my feet. A resort. With what money? Mine. The puzzle pieces snapped together, each one jagged. She had used the guardianship to redirect funds. I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table, where everything seemed to happen now. Betrayals, bargains, quiet revelations, and stared at my hands. Was I losing my memory? Had I given her more than I thought? Had I missed signs? Was I in fact slipping? That was the worst part. The not knowing, the seed of doubt she had planted in my mind, was sprouting vines, winding around every memory like a noose. I began to second-guess things. Did I actually pay the phone bill? Did I leave the oven on? Did I forget her asking about the trust? I opened my drawer. Inside was the old family Bible. I slid my fingers between the pages toward where Charles's envelope had rested for 15 years. The key was still there, cool, heavy, untouched. I held it in my palm and whispered aloud, "Not yet." But I knew soon. There's a special kind of silence that happens at family dinners. The kind that only exists when someone is pretending not to notice they've been forgotten. I was sitting at the children's table, not because there were no chairs at the main one, but because Martha had accidentally miscounted the guests again. "Mom, it's just easier this way," she had said as she handed me a plate without making eye contact. "You're closer to the kitchen, and the kids love having you near." So I sat, knees knocking against a table too low, sipping cold sweet tea from a plastic cup with cartoon dolphins on it. While my granddaughter Lily texted under the table, I felt invisible, like the walls could swallow me whole and no one would notice. I had brought a pie from scratch. My hand still remembered the way to fold butter into flour without a recipe, but it sat on the far counter untouched while Martha passed around tiramisu from Whole Foods. Lily glanced at me, then back at her phone. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Grandma, what did you do before you got old?" The table fell silent. Even the youngest one, Martha's nephew from Charles's side, stopped chewing. I opened my mouth to answer, but Martha was faster. "Oh, she didn't really work," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She stayed home, baked, took care of the house." She sipped her wine and added, almost like a joke, that she was sort of like a professional baker without the profession. They laughed, the polite kind, a chuckle that says, "We're being nice, but let's not dwell." I smiled too, small, tight, but inside a memory slammed into me so hard I almost dropped my fork. I was 29. Martha was in 2nd grade. Charles had just been promoted, but we were still paying off his med school loans. That winter, the hospital cut overtime, and we couldn't afford the new uniform Martha needed for her school recital. So I stayed up 4 nights in a row sewing doll clothes to sell at the church craft fair. Then I took the earnings, bought 2 yards of red velvet, and made her a dress by hand. She wore it proudly, the only girl in class who had something custom. Years later, I found it in the attic, stuffed in a bag labeled "Old Stuff," another flash. Me standing in the back room of a diner at midnight, hands raw from washing dishes, wearing shoes 2 sizes too small because they were the only ones I could find at Goodwill that week. I tried to hold back tears walking home with scraps I didn't ask for. All so Martha could go to college without student loans. All so she could become the woman she was now, the kind who looked through me like I was wallpaper in a house she'd outgrown. I picked up my cup of sweet tea, sipped, and said nothing. Later that night, while everyone else chatted about stocks and real estate, I took my pie from the counter and sliced a piece for myself. It was still warm in the center. Charles used to say, I made pies like I built a life. Humble ingredients, no shortcuts, and always enough to share. But no one wanted a slice. The next morning, Martha called, not to thank me, but to ask why I hadn't brought napkins. I reminded her that she said she'd handle everything. She laughed. Oh, Mother, you forget things. It's fine. Just try to be more organized next time. Next time. As if I were still being invited, I hung up and went to the hall closet, pulled out the apron I hadn't worn in years. It still smelled like cinnamon. I touched the embroidered name stitched into the hem. Evelyn's Kitchen. I had made it during a time when I thought that love was enough, that baking someone's favorite cake was the same as being valued, that showing up, cleaning up, keeping quiet, that all counted. But to Martha, I was only ever the woman who just made pies. That night, I wrote a note in the margin of my journal. One day she will choke on the sweetness she mocked. She told me we were going to her lawyer. I should have known better. The office was in a new building downtown, modern with glass walls and that cold, sterile smell of freshly printed paper and filtered air. Everything about it felt like it was trying too hard to be important. I wore my best coat, the green wool one Charles liked. Martha said it made me look old-fashioned, but I wore it anyway. I wanted to feel like I still belonged to myself. Inside, a man in a gray suit greeted us. He looked about Martha's age. Too young to have any wisdom, but just old enough to have learned how to fake it. He smiled at me too long. "This is Mrs. Howard," Martha said, putting a hand on my back like I was a pet she was introducing. "She's ready to finalize the estate transition we discussed." I blinked. "I am," I said quietly. The man gestured to the conference table. A thick stack of papers sat waiting, the pen already uncapped beside them. "Just a few signatures," he said smoothly. "Nothing complicated. This is a simple restatement of your will and trust. Consolidates everything under Martha's administration. Streamlined, efficient." I sat down slowly. My hands were shaking and not from age. I flipped through the first few pages. Legal jargon wrapped around numbers like barbed wire. Martha leaned over, tapping the signature lines. "You don't need to read all that," she said. "It's standard. We already went over most of it last month, remember?" "We didn't," I said. Her smile vanished. I looked at the top of the page. It listed full asset transfer to Martha Elaine Howard with an immediate forfeiture of Evelyn May Howard's fiduciary control, irrevocable. My voice was small but steady. "I'm not signing this." Martha stood up fast enough to knock over her chair. Her face changed. Cold turned to fury in one breath. "You don't get to do this," she hissed. "You've already caused enough trouble." I rose to leave, but she blocked the door. "You are not leaving here without signing." I looked at the man in the gray suit. "Are you even a lawyer?" He didn't answer. I turned back to Martha. "Is he even licensed?" That's when she snapped. She lunged toward me, grabbed my arm, and yanked hard. The seam of my coat tore open. The sound was sharp and humiliating. "You're a burden," she shouted. "You've always been a burden, a leftover. You think that money is yours? You think your pie recipes and stupid journals mean something? They don't. You're an old woman clinging to things you didn't build." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "If you don't sign," she said, panting, "you are not my mother anymore. Do you hear me? You're no one, nothing." Then she picked up her phone. She dialed quickly, her voice shifting into the calm, fake sweetness she used at hospitals. "Yes. Hi, this is Dr. Martha Howard. I'm here with my elderly mother, and I'm very concerned. She's confused and agitated. She's showing signs of paranoia. I'm afraid she might hurt herself or someone else." I stared at her, stunned. "No, she's not violent," Martha continued, looking me straight in the eye. "But she's been declining rapidly. She shouldn't be alone." 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. One was kind, the other was not. They asked me questions as if I was already guilty. Did I know where I was? What year it was? Who the president was? I answered calmly. I remembered everything. But when they asked about the trust, and I said my daughter had tried to force me to sign it over, they exchanged a look. The unkind one said, "Let's just take her in for observation. Better safe than sorry." I was escorted out of the building like a criminal. People stared. One woman asked if I needed help. I wanted to say yes, but instead I nodded politely and stepped into the back of a squad car. They took me to a facility 20 miles away. Not a hospital, but a place with gray walls and locked doors, and a nurse who called me sweetheart but never looked me in the eye. I spent 48 hours in evaluation. They gave me bland food and watched me take my pills. A psychiatrist asked me if I had ever been suicidal. I said no. He asked if I trusted my daughter. I said, "Not anymore." He scribbled something I couldn't see. When I was finally released, I returned home in a taxi alone. The front door still worked. The lights still turned on. But something fundamental had shifted. My daughter had tried to erase me, not just from the bank, not just from the law, but from her life, from my own life. She had said it herself, "If you do not sign, you are not my mother." And I hadn't signed, so I wasn't. Not to her. But I still had one thing left. The key. The night I came back from the facility, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, wrapped in an old quilt Charles used to keep in his reading chair. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I could still feel the echo of the locked doors, the nurse's forced cheer, the click of the clipboard after every question. I was not crazy. I whispered it aloud to myself as if saying it could make it true. Then I remembered something. Not a face, not a place, a sound, a click, a hiss, a voice. 15 years ago, the day after Charles died, Richard Langford had handed me an envelope, inside which was not only a key, but also a small cassette tape. I had tucked it away, thinking it was just one of Charles's many old dictations. He often recorded thoughts for articles or patient letters, but I never listened to that tape until now. I went to the attic. It took me an hour to find the shoebox, buried under old tax records and faded Christmas cards. Inside was the tape labeled in Charles's handwriting, "Only if needed, Evelyn only." My breath caught. I dusted off the old cassette player in the hallway closet, popped in new batteries, and pressed play. At first, there was just static, then his voice, low, measured, still so familiar. "If you're listening to this, it means things didn't go the way we hoped." I pressed my palm to my chest. "I wasn't a perfect husband. God knows, Evelyn, you deserved better at times. You stood by me when I gave you every reason not to. You protected our children. You raised them into people. I built a career, but you built a family." There was a pause, then a sharp breath. "Martha, she's brilliant, but she's also me. The worst of me. She's proud. She hides behind logic. She forgets love when she smells power. And I see myself in that. I see the same cold ambition that let me hurt you." Another pause, longer this time. "If she ever tries to take what doesn't belong to her, what you built, what I meant for you, then you use this tape. You use it to remind the world who actually mattered." A click, another breath, then the words that changed everything. "If my daughter becomes the man I once was, selfish, ruthless, then let this money serve justice, not genetics. Let it protect my wife, not my name." My hand was trembling. The recording ended with a date spoken softly, March 2nd, 2010. The same week he met with Richard. I wasn't just ready to defend myself. I was ready to be heard. For the first time in years, I reached for the one voice that had always said less, but meant more. I called Richard Langford at sunrise. His wife answered, surprised but kind. She put him on the phone within minutes. "Evelyn." His voice was rough, aged, but strong. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I was wondering when this day would come." By noon, he was at my house with a battered briefcase and 2 manila envelopes. He laid them gently on the table. "The tape will help, but this," he tapped the larger envelope, "is the real weapon." Inside was a notarized document dated the same day as the recording. Charles's signature, Langford's. A third witness from the county courthouse. It was an addendum to the trust, a quiet clause locked behind secondary conditions, only to be activated if a guardian attempted to exploit or reallocate trust funds against the interest of the primary beneficiary. The clause transferred everything back to me, all of it, with one condition. The tape must be played in court on record. At the bottom, in Charles's familiar scroll, was a final line. "If this tape is unsealed, then denial is no longer possible." Langford looked at me over his glasses. "Martha didn't know about this," he said. "Your husband made sure of it. He didn't trust even the idea of what she could become." I nodded. There were no tears, just resolve. It was time to speak, not out of rage, but out of defense of my name, my dignity, my place. Let Martha have her resort, her wine, her lies. I had a voice and proof, and I was about to use both. The courtroom was small, but every seat was filled. A woman from the Oklahoma Ledger sat in the back, her notepad balanced on her knee. A local news crew was there too, just one camera, discreet. But I saw Martha flinch when the red recording light came on. She had come in wearing navy blue, her hair pulled back in that same tight knot she always wore when she needed control. Her face was powdered, but it couldn't cover the tension. I wore gray, no makeup, just the brooch Charles gave me on our 30th anniversary, and a small Bible clutched in my hands. The judge was kind and methodical. She listened carefully, patiently. Richard Langford presented the recording first. The courtroom was silent, except for Charles's voice, steady and unflinching. If my daughter becomes the man I once was, let this money serve justice, not genetics. Martha didn't speak. She didn't even blink, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. Then came the document signed, witnessed, sealed for over a decade. Proof that Charles had foreseen this and had chosen to protect me the only way he could, from the grave. Next, the bank records transfers totaling $2,400,000 into Florida property accounts. Signatures, email trails, proof of her petition for guardianship filed without my consent. And then the psychiatric report from the facility. It said clearly, no signs of dementia, no signs of self-harm. Subject demonstrates full cognitive clarity. I was not losing my mind. Martha was losing her mask. When her attorney stood, he barely lasted 5 minutes. All he could offer was spin, concern for my well-being, miscommunication, a family misunderstanding. The judge did not even look at him. She turned to Martha. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Martha stood. For once, she looked small. "I was trying to help my mother," she said. "She wasn't coping well. She's never been good with money. I thought I was protecting the family legacy." I met her eyes. She couldn't hold my gaze. The judge nodded once, then she spoke. "In my courtroom, guardianship is not a tool for theft. Dr. Martha Howard, you abused legal access. You manipulated your mother's trust, literally and figuratively. You will be removed as guardian effective immediately. Your medical license will be reviewed by the board. And as of this moment, you are stripped of any right to the Howard Trust." A gasp rippled through the room. I exhaled, not from victory, but from release. The judge turned to me. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't relieved, but because somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the life I had always put aside. "Mrs. Evelyn Howard, you are hereby reinstated as the sole trustee and beneficiary of your late husband's estate. I hope you find peace in knowing the system, at least today, worked." People applauded quietly. The camera light flicked off. It was over, but it wasn't, not yet. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of a modest brick building with a new sign above the door. The Howard Home for Mothers Forgotten. It used to be a private care facility. I had once applied there years ago when I thought I needed help. They had turned me away because I didn't have a legal sponsor. Now I owned the land. I didn't need to be admitted. I rebuilt it. With part of the trust, I turned the building into a community center for elderly women who had been discarded, dismissed, or overlooked by their own children. We offer legal help, cooking classes, and weekly art therapy. I come in every Wednesday and make apple pie with whoever wants to learn. I always bring cinnamon. A reporter came last month. A young woman, bright eyes, voice full of wonder. She asked me, "Why did you name it after your husband, after everything?" I smiled. "Because he finally did what was right," I said. "And I believe in honoring redemption when it's earned." The next day, the headline on the Oklahoma Ledger read, "Dr. Disinherit's Mother Gets Disinherited Instead. How a Pie Grandma Built Justice from Scratch." The article went viral, and Martha lost her medical license pending review. The Florida resort filed for bankruptcy within a month. No investor wanted to be associated with the daughter who called her mother a policeman. She called me once, left a voicemail. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice hollow. "You ruined everything." I never called back because she was wrong. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped pretending silence was loyalty. The ribbon was pale blue. It fluttered in the breeze, tied across the entrance of the newly finished front porch, painted white, wide enough for 2 rocking chairs and a lifetime of Sunday conversations. The Howard home stood proud behind it, bricks freshly cleaned, flowers blooming in neat rows, windows bright with soft curtains, hand sewn by women who had not been called needed in years. I sat in the front row, not in the back, not by the kitchen, not on the floor, front and center, with my name on the program and my granddaughter's hand in mine. Lily had grown taller, gentler. Something had shifted in her since the court case. Some quiet knowing. She didn't speak about her mother much, and I didn't ask her to. But today, she leaned close and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Grandma." It was the first time anyone had said that to me out loud. A woman from the local radio station introduced me. She called me founder, visionary, protector of the forgotten. Words that once would have made me laugh, but now I held them in my chest like warmth. I stood up slowly, walked to the podium, my steps steady, and then I opened the letter. Not a speech, not a performance, just a letter I had written the night before with a pen that still smelled like ink and lavender soap. "Dear Martha," I read aloud. A hush fell over the courtyard. "You once said, 'You didn't earn that money. It was Dad's.' And maybe in some ways you were right. The money began with him, but the life, it began with me." I paused. No tears, just breath. "You thought I didn't know anything because I didn't speak. But silence is not ignorance. Silence is memory. Silence is protection." The wind stirred slightly. "You mistook my stillness for weakness. My hands folded in prayer for hands that couldn't push back. My pies, my sewing, my patience. You called them nothing, but they built everything you now live in." I looked at the people before me. Women in wheelchairs, women holding rosaries, women with hands like mine, wrinkled, worn, still strong. I continued. "I give the rest of the Howard Trust, not to heirs, not to family names, but to this place, to the women who gave everything and were told it was just staying home. To those who carried children, secrets, pain, and still kept the dinner warm." There was a murmur of tissue paper sobs. I finished. "I do not need to be called mother anymore, but I will never stop being one, not just to the daughter who forgot, but to every woman here who needs someone to remember." Applause broke out, soft and long like waves. Later, they unveiled the plaque outside the reading room. It said, "The Evelyn May Howard Library for Quiet Women Who Remember Everything." Inside, beside the shelves of donated books, was a small glass display. Behind it, a blue knitted shawl. I made it in the psych ward, stitch by stitch, loop by loop. Every hour I wasn't sleeping, I was weaving. It kept me from disappearing. Beneath it was a printed copy of my letter framed. Beside that, a cassette player and a small sign that said, "Press play if someone ever tells you you're just a placeholder." Some days now, I just sit on the porch. I knit blankets for new residents, read psalms aloud to whoever wants to listen, and sometimes when no one's looking, I walk into the reading room and press play. Charles's voice still startles me, but it reminds me he saw me even when he didn't know how to say it. I think that matters. Last week, a young nurse asked me, "Do you feel like you finally got justice?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I got something better." She tilted her head. "I got my life back, and for the first time since I was 19, I didn't feel like I was keeping house for someone else. I was home, mine. Thank you for staying with me until the very end." If this story touched something deep inside you, a memory of a mother, a grandmother, or perhaps even yourself, someone who gave everything and was quietly forgotten, then let it be known. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another truth that took a lifetime to tell. Because justice doesn't always shout. Because memory never goes out of style.